The wanderings end in Book 13. Odysseus is asleep when the Phaeacian ship brings him to Ithaca, and the sailors deposit him on the shore, still asleep, wrapped in a blanket, with the gifts Alcinous sent him home with. The ship turns to stone before it reaches Phaeacia. Odysseus wakes up alone on a beach in thick mist and does not recognize where he is. The first person to speak to him is Athena in disguise. He lies to her immediately, instinctively, before he knows who she is, constructing a false identity on the spot with the ease of long practice. She listens to his fabrication, drops the disguise, and laughs. She tells him she is only the greatest goddess of cunning and craft in the pantheon, and she delights in him for exactly this quality. He cannot stop being deceptive, even when there is nothing at stake. It is one of the warmest exchanges in the poem, a recognition between equals who admire the same quality in each other, and it sets up the final movement. Odysseus in Ithaca, still disguised, still testing, still concealing himself until he knows enough to act. Today, the Ithaca books. What homecoming actually looks like when you have been gone for 20 years and everyone you love has been trying to survive your absence. Athena disguises Odysseus as an old beggar and sends him to the hut of Eumaeus, his swineherd, before he goes anywhere near the palace. This is not a temporary measure. Odysseus will remain in disguise for the better part of 7 books. Through his meeting with Eumaeus, his reunion with Telemachus, his first evening in the palace, his interview with Penelope, the recognition by Eurycleia, the night in the hall, the bow contest. He does not reveal himself to Penelope until the final book. The length and thoroughness of the disguise has struck readers as excessive, but it serves a purpose that the poem takes seriously, and in purely practical terms, it may be. Odysseus returns to a household that has been under occupation for years. He does not know who can be trusted. He knows from Agamemnon's shade in the underworld what happens when a returning warrior assumes that the people he left behind are still exactly as he left them. The disguise is the lesson of Agamemnon applied. Verify before acting, observe before committing, test before trusting. Eumaeus passes the test immediately, without knowing he is being tested. He receives the beggar with complete and instinctive generosity, gives him food, a cloak, a place to sleep, courtesy. Without knowing who he is, motivated entirely by the obligations of Xenia and by his own character. He speaks of Odysseus with grief and loyalty that is obviously genuine. He is, in the moral vocabulary of the poem, exactly what a good servant is. The books spent in Eumaeus' hut before Odysseus goes to the palace are often treated as structural padding. They are not. They are the poem measuring, carefully, who has remained faithful and who has not. What follows is a series of tests applied with method to everyone in the household. The test that matters most is not the bow contest. It is the observation of who weeps when a strange beggar mentions Odysseus' name, and who does not. The poem is extraordinarily attentive to grief as evidence. Grief in Homer is not weakness. It is the proof of the relationship that produced it. Telemachus comes to Eumaeus' hut on Athena's instruction. He does not know who the old beggar is. Athena tells Odysseus this is the moment to reveal himself to his son, but privately, not in the hut where Eumaeus can witness it. When they are alone, Athena transforms Odysseus back to himself, and Telemachus, who has never known his father, looks at this man who was a decrepit old beggar a moment ago and is now tall, dark, and radiantly handsome, and assumes he must be a god. The transformation is so abrupt that the explanation cannot be natural. Odysseus tells him, "I am not a god, I am your father." And Telemachus weeps. Odysseus weeps. They cry together for a long time. Homer reports this without embarrassment or qualification. These are warriors by training and by culture, and they weep. And the poem treats this as appropriate and expected, because what they have lost between them is 20 years, and the reunion does not restore those years. It acknowledges their cost. The reunion is also immediately a council of war. Odysseus begins planning the assault on the suitors the moment the grief has passed. The two movements, personal, emotional, strategic, calculating, are not in tension. They are the same man operating in different registers. When Odysseus enters the palace for the first time, disguised, a dog is lying on a dunghill by the gate. The dog is Argus. Odysseus raised him as a puppy, trained him himself, and left for Troy before he was old enough to hunt. No one has cared for him in 20 years. He is old and flea-ridden and neglected. When Odysseus passes, Argus lifts his head, pricks his ears, and wags his tail. He recognizes his master instantly. He is the first living creature in Ithaca to recognize Odysseus. Before Telemachus, before Penelope, before anyone. Odysseus sees him, recognizes him, and turns away so Eumaeus does not notice the tears. He cannot acknowledge the dog. The disguise must hold, and he passes. Argus dies in the same moment, as if the one thing he was waiting for was to see his master returned. Homer gives this scene 4 lines, and they have been haunting readers for 3,000 years. There is no interpretation required. The scene is perfectly clear and perfectly devastating. The only thing worth saying about it is that Homer knew exactly what he was doing, placing the purest, most uncomplicated act of recognition in the poem in a dog. Before Odysseus has exchanged a word with any human being he loves, the recognition of Odysseus will take 7 more books and tests of extraordinary ingenuity. Argus required nothing. He just knew. The human recognition comes in Book 19, when Penelope instructs a servant to wash the beggar's feet. The servant is Eurycleia, Odysseus' nurse from childhood, now very old, who has never lost her grief for him. She takes his foot in her hands to wash it and feels the scar. She has known that scar since she helped clean the wound when he was a young man. A boar hunting accident on his grandfather Autolycus' estate. Her hands remember it before her mind does. She looks up. She knows. Homer inserts at this moment 46 lines of digression, narrating the entire story of how Odysseus got the scar. The hunt, the wound, the name-giving by his grandfather, the context of his childhood. This digression, which interrupts the recognition scene at its most tense point, has been analysed by Erich Auerbach in one of the most celebrated pieces of literary criticism of the 20th century, Mimesis. Homer simply cannot pass a detail without narrating its full history. The scar is not just a scar. It is the whole history of how it came to be a scar, and the whole story of who gave him his name, and the whole story of who he is. Identity in the Odyssey is not abstract. It is embodied, particular, accumulated over time. The scar is the record of specific events that could only have happened to this specific body. Eurycleia's hands recognize it not through reasoning, but through touch. The body knows. Next week, the bow contest, the slaughter, and the marriage bed. The bow contest is not primarily a feat of strength. It is a public demonstration of identity. Only Odysseus can string the bow, and when he strings it, everyone in the room knows who they are dealing with. The slaughter that follows has disturbed readers for centuries, and we will look at it honestly. And the recognition scene with Penelope, the last and most important in the poem, is, as we will see, entirely on her terms. Because Penelope is not simply the faithful wife waiting for her husband, she is, as I've been suggesting since episode 3, the most strategically intelligent person in the Odyssey. She's been managing an impossible situation for 3 years with the same quality of mind that Odysseus has been applying to his wanderings. The poem gives them both the same epithet: crafty, resourceful. They are, in the deepest sense, matched. I'll see you next Thursday.